The Boy in the Garage. Prologue. 2 years ago. The shouting seemed to climb the walls of the 2-story home, snake through the window and into their bed. But it was the knocking that seemed to shake the whole house. Jarred awake, Emmett Cedars hated that he recognized the knocking, the yelling, and knew it to be his fault. Cedars! 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 There was so much rage in it. Emmett's last name warped until it barely counted as anything more than a fury-drenched sound. Emmett grappled for the lamp on the nightstand. Once it was on, he crossed to the nearest window and pushed aside the curtain. "It's Kevin Rubio," he groaned, and lightly rested his forehead against the grass. "Again?" Jocelyn Keller said from the bed. "Emmett, it's 4 a.m. You can't keep letting him do this. You're his therapist, not his keeper." "I'll see what he wants. Remind him he has to make an appointment," he told her as he slid into a robe and tied it around his waist. "Emmett," Jocelyn called just as he was leaving the room. Something about her tone caught at something in his chest, such that he turned back. "I don't like the way he sounds. I can get my—" "No," Emmett said, shaking his head at the closet where his wife kept her gun. He still didn't like the fact that they kept a firearm in the house, dismantled or not. It felt like inviting trouble, just as much as his wife becoming a police officer 4 years ago had. At the time, Jocelyn had argued that his operating a vampire therapy practice posed a far larger risk. It hadn't been until these recent midnight intrusions by Kevin that Emmett had been forced to agree. "What if I called the station?" Jocelyn went on. "I'm sure it's nothing," he replied. "And besides, you only just got your detective shield. You wouldn't want to lose credibility over calling in something as small as this. I'll be right back." He blew her a kiss, which she pretended to miss and had to reach down to the floor to scoop up. Emmett rolled his eyes and moved into the hallway, but had only taken 2 steps when the next door opened to let a little face peer out. "Daddy." "Hey, little Brooke." Emmett squatted down to his son's height. "The loud man is back again." The 6-year-old rubbed at his eyes, causing his glasses to sit crookedly on his nose. With one arm he hugged a stuffed Thor, holding a stuffed hammer. "Are you going to go make him be quiet? Do you need Thor's hammer?" He peeled away the Velcro and held out the hammer. "Thanks, kid, but I don't think I'm worthy. How about you hold on to that while I go have a chat with the loud man?" "Cedars! Get out here!" The yells were getting louder. Jocelyn's cop instincts had been right. The man sounded different this time. This wasn't just another midnight visit, but something with intent behind it. "Make him feel better." Brooklyn turned to go back into his bedroom. "You always make people feel better." "Does Thor need a kiss goodnight?" Emmett whispered to the closing door, feeling some strange desire not to go downstairs just yet, like something prehistoric in him was urging him to stay put. "Thor is a stuffed animal, Dad. Stop being weird." Emmett grinned and hurried downstairs. Due to Brooklyn's fear of the dark, there were night lights in every room in the house. As he reached the bottom of the stairs and passed through the living room, his ankles were well lit every step of the way, so he didn't bother turning on any lights. Kevin Rubio was one of Emmett's clients. Emmett had been seeing him ever since Kevin moved from Puerto Rico to NYC with his family. As many humans had been, Kevin had been turned into a vampire in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria last year, in September 2017. The family had moved here just so Kevin could start seeing Emmett, the only therapist that specialized in vampire kind on the East Coast. Recently, Kevin had been invited to move back in with his wife and daughter. Emmett had never seen somebody want something so desperately, but also not trust themselves to have it. 3 times in the past 2 weeks, Kevin had shown up in the middle of the night, begging for a midnight session with his therapist, swearing that it was an emergency when it was anything but. At this point, Emmett had the speech memorized. The words were already coming out of his mouth before he even had the door open all the way. Half of the therapist's brain was already back in bed with his wife, planning how best to apologize for this latest intrusion of his home therapy practice into their lives. "Kevin, you can't keep doing this. I have a family here that..." But Emmett didn't get to finish. The second he slid the deadbolt free, the heavy oak door was banging into his face. He stumbled backwards. Blood flooded from his nose. He brought his hand up to it, which was the only defense he had as the man burst into his home. No, not the man. The vampire. "You said it was safe," Kevin yelled as he gave Emmett a hard shove. Had Kevin Rubio been human, the shove would have just sent Emmett stumbling backwards. Since it was a vampire's strength, Emmett was thrown through the air to land on the glass coffee table. It shattered underneath him. He groaned, prayed that his cop wife would somehow hear the commotion, but not tiny Brooklyn. "Kevin," Emmett used the couch to leverage himself away from the wreckage that had been the coffee table, and barely felt the wood digging into his back or the glass tumbling from his hair. "Tell me what happened. Let me help." Emmett might have known his face for just a few months, might have sat across from Kevin as he accepted what being a vampire meant, how it would impact his life and that of his family. But the creature stomping towards Emmett now was not the Kevin Emmett knew. No, the Kevin that sat on Emmett's couch each Friday morning had always been afraid of his own violence, afraid of himself, afraid of what lived inside him. The Kevin Rubio in Emmett's house tonight might have been wearing Kevin's face, but there was something heavier, darker, behind it, something broken. "You said it was safe," Kevin continued, a tall, striking shadow that the nightlight somehow didn't touch. "You made me feel safe, but I'm not. I wasn't, I can't be." The words were tight with something akin to rage, but might have been grief. "I can't be. But she thought I was, Doc. Imani thought I was." Emmett's gut churned as he began to suspect what had happened. He swallowed and tasted blood, either from his damaged nose or from gnawing at the inside of his cheek. "Let's step into my office." He gestured towards the door where he saw his patients, ignoring the blood running down one of his legs. "We can talk through it. No matter what happened with your wife, Kevin, I'm sure we could..." "She fought me off with a knife." Kevin leaped over the pile of shattered wood and glass. Emmett saw a flash of silver and dove sideways. He reached his hands and knees before Kevin was on him again. A kick to Emmett's side sent him sliding into the kitchen, finally coming to a stop when he hit the cupboards. Winded, but glad he hadn't felt any ribs break, he scanned the room for anything he could use to defend himself. "This knife..." Kevin came into the kitchen, knife balanced across both palms with the reverence of a family heirloom. "It was my abuelo's, and then my padre's, and then mine. Imani was using it to cut the boot in for us when she had to turn it on me." He shut his eyes, every laugh line in his face tightening into lost lines. "She said she trusted me. She said she felt safe with me. She said she knew I wouldn't hurt her, wouldn't hurt our little Nina. But she was wrong. Corazon, she hugged me and her throat was right there. Why didn't you tell me I wasn't safe? That she wasn't safe from me?" "I'm so sorry, Kevin." Emmett held both hands aloft to convey harmlessness. "I know how excited you've been to move back home. You told me making boudin is how your family celebrates all big achievements, right? All using that same knife to cut the pieces? When was the last time you used..." But going down memory lane wasn't the right choice either. "You're a liar." The man slashed at Emmett, causing red to burst from the human's forearm and shoulder. Emmett gasped. Suddenly, there was a pressure around his throat. Emmett kicked out with his legs and clawed at the hands. Still the vampire held on, and the world began to dim. Liar! Kevin slammed Emmett's head into the cupboard behind him, causing lights to go off in the therapist's vision. Mentiroso! Kevin drove the knife into Emmett's shoulder deep enough to lodge in the wood behind Emmett. Liar! 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 Kevin cried and cried and cried and... Daddy! Air returned just as the hand dropped from Emmett's throat. He coughed until his vision cleared enough to see Kevin, turning towards the child silhouetted in the doorway. Stuffed Thor still hugged tight to his chest. Kevin, Emmett wheezed, but couldn't get up with his shoulder pinned to the cupboard. Kevin, please. Por favor, Kevin echoed. My wife said that too. Kevin moaned the words while crouched low, his attention shifting. It didn't stop me from killing our little hija in front of her. And then Kevin was pouncing. He was almost a blur as he shot forward and grabbed onto the boy in fuzzy green and gold pajamas, not with his hands but with his teeth. He dug his very teeth into the 6-year-old's throat, and then, on his hands and knees, he shook the child back and forth like a dog with a chew toy. But chew toys squeaked. Brooklyn screamed. Fingers slick with blood, vision still spotty, and with his head wound gluing his hair to the side of his face, Emmett gripped the knife in his own shoulder and yanked it out. He didn't remember crawling across the kitchen floor to drive the blade into Kevin's lower back. He'd been aiming for the heart, but he didn't have a vampire's strength. He only had that of a desperate father, and even that wasn't enough. Kevin kicked out and connected with Emmett's knee. The bone shattered. Emmett crashed onto the tile again. Bile surged at the back of his throat. His right leg wouldn't respond from the hip down, but he couldn't see that, couldn't even feel it. Kevin howled and released his hold on Brooklyn. The kid, Emmett's kid, went rolling across the room and only stopped when he met the end of the couch. Emmett lost time. Seconds, minutes, a half-dozen ragged breaths, and he found himself poised over Kevin. The vampire was laid out beneath him, but it wasn't Kevin. White-knuckling the hilt of the blade he'd managed to regain hold of, Emmett held it above Kevin's heart with his full, very human weight behind it. He didn't stop to think that the weapon wasn't wood. It would hurt the creature, but it wouldn't kill it. They looked at each other for a moment. There was an accusation in both gazes. You're a monster, their eyes screamed at each other, and upon recognizing it, they both screamed back soundlessly. You made me one. Bang! Emmett didn't even know what happened. All he knew was that he'd been ready to kill the vampire, and then he was on his back. A pool of warmth was spreading beneath him, soaking through his robe. His ears were ringing. He let his head fall sideways and saw Kevin licking red from the yellow tile, his tongue leaving marks on the floor as if it were a paintbrush. Money, Kevin mumbled, red bubbles appearing on his lips. Corazon, so... And then there was a second gunshot, and Kevin collapsed face down. This second bullet had blown apart the majority of the vampire's throat, leaving him to twitch, gurgle, and go still. Emmett! Oh God, Emmett, help me! The words came from a distance, muffled as if Emmett's ears had cotton in them. Emmett saw his naked wife kneeling by Brooklyn, saw her drop her gun by her bare knees, saw her clamp a hand around Brooklyn's throat, saw the blood leak between her fingers anyway. But it was the stuffed Greek god Thor Emmett couldn't look away from. Thor's button eyes were as empty as Brooklyn's.